All right, it's starting to record now.
You want to start out?
Sure. Hey everybody, Jason here from the Marshfield Ag Research Station and the Oehmichen Partnership for Integrated Conservation.
Hey everybody, I'm Matthew Oehmichen of Short Lane Ag Supply and also for the Oehmichen Partnership for Integrated Conservation.
Patrick Bula, I'm a conservation specialist with Marathon County and I help to coordinate the Oehmichen Partnership for Integrated Conservation.
He basically keeps us all organized
Yep.
and on focus.
So basically what we're doing here today is a field walk experience.
And we're also making it virtual because, you know, circumstances of the year have made it very challenging to organize field walks and such, but we figured that this is another great way to reach not only a broader audience, but reach you in the comfort of your own farm, home, what have you.
This is going to be very much like one of our field walks. It's casual and unscripted, so we don't really know what we're going to say, which scares us a little bit with Matthew sitting here.
Well, we're going to make it raw and informative.
I guess it's important to note from the beginning that kind of the overarching theme of this field tour today is forage production systems and what can be done to keep continuous living cover and doing that without disturbing the soil.
Do we want to explain what we're looking at here? The field that we're in, what you guys have gotten on the ground here at Mars this year?
Yeah, so this is a Italian rhiza crop that's really taken off in popularity. So we'll be talking about no-tilling, interseeding into existing forages or into corn crops. We're starting out at the research station today and we're currently sitting in a field that is a 3-year-old alfalfa stand that's been interseeded with Italian rye, which has been harvested 4 times already this year and will be one more time. But still, once we get into that 3rd year especially, we really start to see things thin out, and some winters are harder than others on alfalfa. So every spring we're going to have varying degrees of winter kill and thinning in our field, and one very viable option for keeping those fields productive for another year is to interseed Italian rye into it. And so we've made it just a common practice on the research station to cover all of our 3-year-old stands with Italian rye, and it really pays off. We start to see that typical production curve that we're used to seeing with alfalfa, where with each cutting maybe the quality goes up but the yield goes down, and when we interseed Italian rye into it, that curve kind of flatlines, so we keep production through the whole season. You had a busy spring keeping Italian rye seed available.
That was the one thing that even our dad, who founded Short Lane Ag Supply in '87, said that this was one of our biggest ryegrass seasons, annual, perennial, especially with Italian. But that was the biggest thing was, hey, I got a really skimpy hay field once again. I want to bolster, I want to set myself up. I don't want to run out of forage like these last few seasons prior. And Italian ryegrass is not only cost effective, but you get more out of it than what you paid for. Meaning you get great tonnage and you get great forage quality and you get consistent performance with it, which is really the nice part. And that's the one thing that's the first thing I noticed with not only this field, but any of the other fields where you see, whether it's pure Italian ryegrass or if it's interseeded Italian ryegrass, they hold up to traffic, they hold up to any kind of inclement weather that you get tossed
It's a nice
at
sea
it.
of green out here.
It's a very dynamic forage crop.
The seeding rate, it all, so whether we do it pure seeding or interseeding into alfalfa, is a different rate. So we're doing roughly about 10 pounds per acre in alfalfa, which is really economical. It ends up not being a very big cost and putting it in with the no-till drill. And in the pure seeding, we're doing closer to 20 to 25 pounds.
If we get back to the conservation points of this as well, if we try and relate this to our regenerative principles, we're looking at maintaining armor on the soil, cover on the soil at all times. We have a living root in the ground at all times, and we're actually incorporating some more diversity into our vegetation as well by interseeding this into, say, alfalfa.
And add to that quality. So one reason why Italian rye has taken off the way it has is because it's phenomenal forage quality.
It's like a win-win-win. So what kind of like tonnage boost do you see per acre when you interseed?
That's a good question. I'm last year when we compared where an old alfalfa stand was just left alone and where it was interseeded, we were improving the yield over 100%.
Wow. That's a selling point in itself right there.
Yeah. All of the things that we're showing today are part of our kind of overall program that Patrick spends a lot of time running with on-farm demonstration and research trials. So actually, just out of sight of this camera here is a small trial that we have. One of 3 Italian rye trials here at the research station where we're putting on different fertilizer rates and manure rates and looking at how that affects yield and quality through the season. And that's something that we're hoping to gather that information and then convey that to farmers in the area so we have a little better of an idea of how to manage this crop in a well-managed forage program. So in some of our peer seeding situations, we have mixed some Bercine clover in with it to try to keep the protein higher. But what we've found is clovers, when we're relying on manure as our main nutrient source on these, you really have to watch that manure application rate because it's hard on the clovers. We have even seen that it can burn the Italian rye a little bit when we get up to like that 10,000 gallon rate, but the Italian rye will snap out of it, whereas some of those clovers don't.
Holy cow, up to 10,000 gallons an acre.
If we approach that, we typically don't practice that, but we're looking at different rates in our project.
And now you mentioned after cuttings coming in and supplementing some nitrogen through manure, what are you finding as far as the nitrogen requirements of this crop after cutting? What does it need?
Well, that actually I can't answer very well either because that's what we're doing that trial for. So we have multiple nitrogen rates. It definitely looks like there's, visually, because I haven't really analyzed any of it yet, but visually it looks like we're getting a greater yield response to where we put on more nitrogen, which is what we would expect, but is it economical, and does it also equate to quality differences? Very well could, but we don't know for sure because I haven't taken the data that far yet. So but that's something that the reason we do these projects is so in the winter we have information that we can convey to farmers. So
that's very timely of you. Thank you.
This spot here, and maybe this is the spot where there was more wheel traffic in the previous 2 growing seasons, or maybe this was a spot where water ponded in the spring after snow melt, but you would have to look really hard to find any alfalfa. And if you didn't have the interseeding here, you'd have nothing. And so when you start taking, all these little spots like this that maybe it doesn't look overly significant, but you multiply that over a field that's 20 or 40 acres, that makes a big difference in yield. And not only that, quality. So something's going to grow here, we know that. So if the alfalfa has completely thinned out of here, something will fill it in, but it's not probably going to be something of very high quality. So if we come in and no-till Italian rye into it, we're ensuring that we're going to have something of quality. So,
well, cool stuff. Anything else, Patrick?
Nothing else to add.
All right, well, that'll conclude virtual walk number 1, where you're seeing interseeded Italian ryegrass into an old established hay field or alfalfa field, and we'll carry on to the next part. All right, here's virtual tour number 2. We're still in Marathon County, but where we're nearby is, we're closer to Colby, Wisconsin, near Cherokee Park, and we're in a soybean field. This is a field where we have 3 different things going on. We're expanding on the first year no-till section that we established when we had corn silage here last year. So the beans are in a 2-year no-till system. And then we expanded that into another section right next to it, and we made that a first-year established no-till field. And then the bordering areas to the north and south of those 2 strips, they have been in conventional tilled system. So this is my dad's field, and his typical rotations out in this section are 2 to 3 years of row cropping, followed by some small grains and cover cropping. And he'll have instances of no-till, minimum till in between. But since this was corn silage, there was a chisel plowing done, but obviously that was done on the conventional north and south half. And I guess to keep going on to that, what we wanted to find out here was, does soil biology showcase significance with the overall bean stand? And is there any other kind of observational stuff towards maybe potential yield with the no-tilling? Because we all know that the no-tilling has huge cost savings operational towards, being a one-pass system, you're using less fuel, it's less time that you're in the field. But we wanted to see more of that. Where can the soil biology influence more than that?
So when we first drove out here, I thought this looked rather unimpressive as a demonstration site because it's just a big field of soybeans.
Soybeans.
But as we started walking through them and observing things, it actually became very clear that there is a difference here.
It's all the same variety. This is a 1/6 credenz, a 1/6 maturity credenz bean.
So there's a stark line, so there's obviously something going on there. That's the transition between the no-till and the conventional till. And when you start walking through this and start asking questions why, it is very obvious to all of us right away. We notice that there's extremely more earthworm activity, and I don't know if you can see down there. These are all earthworm middens, so as you peel them away, you'll find the hole or the burrow that the worm, oftentimes you'll see the worm disappear as soon as you peel it back. But anyway, this field is full of them, and as we go into the conventionally tilled area, there's very few, hardly any, a lot harder to find. And so I think what probably one of our theories is, the area that's still holding on to green had more moisture available to it as things became moisture limiting for that period of time in August. So this, because of the earthworm activity, we have better drainage earlier in the season, and we have better ability to hold water later in the season because this hasn't been tilled. So
yeah, you've heard me talk about this plenty of times before. What makes worms so significant, especially in a farming system, is just the amount of debris that these worms can process. So a lot of people get concerned and see that in fields where they no-till, if their biology is really low, the debris just adds up to the point where it's just not processing fast enough. But a moderate level of earthworm activity and nightcrawler activity in your field can process up to 2 tons of debris per acre per year. And that is a cited study that was done in joint with the University of Wisconsin and another Midwest university where they showed that.
So and Patrick, grab that once. What's the first thing you think when you hold that?
It's crumbly, it's got good structure to it. We can see
is it soft?
It is soft. It's granular. It's a good seed bed, ultimately, is what it is.
And I think, the one thing as you start digging around in here, I think the soil is firm, which is what we would come to expect in a long-term no-till soil. And so if you ran equipment, and there's plenty of moisture in here right now, if you ran equipment across this right now, you wouldn't even see the lug marks from the tractor. So that could be perceived as a bad thing. But since we have all of this earthworm activity creating the burrows, this firm soil is still able to take in water. So,
and just a quick note on earthworms. If you want to just take a look at your own fields and see how many earthworms are out there, an easy way to do this is to dig a 1 foot by 1 foot sort of hole out in your field, and a good measure of just an idea of where you are with earthworms is counting the number of worms that you pull out of that hole. If you have 25 worms in that square foot hole, that equates to about 1 million earthworms per acre. And to give you an idea of what they're contributing, then that 1 million earthworms per acre contribute 100 tons of castings per acre. Those are some estimated values, but yeah, relatively unhealthy soil can have even as many as 250,000 earthworms, and healthy soils in tip-top shape can have up to nearly 2 million earthworms per acre. So they're cycling a lot. They're doing a lot of work for you there.
Next thing I wanted to say, and that was going to Jason's point about the firmness of here, is, and this is, I did a video on this before, is I was walking out here after when we had that hurricane come through. I was sinking in past my ankles in the conventional section, but once I walked into here, it was like I was stepping onto a platform. It's absolutely amazing. So as like a field operator, that's invaluable to know that you have a consistency of firmness here, that you can take that equipment on here and you don't have to worry about trenching, blocking down, that kind of thing.
Now you're not going to have to fill it in the spring to fix ruts.
That's exactly right. And that just saves you way more time. Now, the last thing I wanted to show is on an interseeding standpoint, which you can do with soybeans. You can interseed these, and this is the time to do it. So if you look across this field, generally it's green, but it's getting that hue of yellow. And this is prime time to do that. And this is why. So if you look down here, you can start seeing these yellow leaves here, and they're just starting to drop, but you still have plenty of soil exposure. So if you would take a broadcasting or an airflow of rye, and you could do it anywhere from 75 to 150 pounds to the acre, generally 75 to 100 will do the trick, and you spread that, they'll hit the ground and get better soil to seed contact and not get blanketed or zapped away from these leaves. The worst thing you can have is you have all these leaves on the ground and then that seed sits on top. What you want to have is that seed hit the ground and then land that on top. And the other reason that this is a foolproof plan for interseeding is because with the canopy that you have right here, there's plenty of moisture down here, and it's going to maintain that moisture. And those seeds will start sprouting. And the best part is the stuff only gets so big that you'll be able to combine right over the top, and you'll have a living cover going into spring.
In regards to that interseeding, Matt, have you experienced any issues with slugs in the past? Some guys will air seed a crop on and they'll find that they hardly get any emergence due to slugs actually coming through. What's a good way to mitigate that, to really test for that before you put a seeding out there?
That is an excellent question. So I learned this from my friend Damon Reeby, who is for Wisconsin Dairyland Aviation, is you can go out there, you lay some kind of flat board down or tarp or something for those slugs to crawl into when it gets to this hot, sunny midday. And then you leave it there for like a night or two, and you go out there and then you just kind of do a count. And you can go online and you can see like how many slugs you want to see or don't want to see. But you're right, if you have a lot of slugs out here, they'll just chew up the germ and it's going to be for naught. But the last 2 seasons that we did interseeding on any soybeans, that hasn't been the issue for us. So that was a very excellent question. All right, guys. Is there anything else that you wanted to point out here?
Nothing else. Jason?
Cool. Good. Well, thank you so much. That concludes virtual tour number 2.
Hi everyone, we're here today at Maple Ridge Dairy with Brian and Justin. I don't know, you guys want to introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about your operation before we get going?
Sure. So I'm Brian, owner and manager of Maple Ridge Dairy. We crop around 3,800 acres and we milk 1,600 cows. And here is Justin, our crops manager.
So what in particular are we standing in front of here right now? This is new for you guys this year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this year we decided to experiment a little bit more with cover cropping, playing with a little bit of population and row spacing in our corn. And right now behind us we're standing in some 60-inch row corn with alfalfa planted as a cover crop.
And so you mentioned you got a few different treatments going on here. What were the variables you were messing around with? What were you interested in exploring?
So there's 6 trials out here. In our 60-inch rows, we have a population of 40,000, 50,000, and 60,000. And then we did three trials with 30-inch rows at 24, 28, and 32. And everything has got alfalfa seeded into it.
Based on what you see right now, how do those trials compare? How do those different treatments compare to each other?
We're noticing in the low population, the alfalfa stand is a little stronger. Grain-wise, in the high populations, it's this year with the year we had, it seems that we have a really good grain fill. But without harvest, I'm not quite for sure where we're at yet.
Brian, what was the reasoning behind going and trying this new system? Why were you interested in stepping into this kind of practice?
Well, we're excited to cover crop with alfalfa and have a cover crop that instead of burning down or planting back into, we've got a stand that with any luck will last 3 to 4 years. A cover crop that lasts 3 to 4 years, we're quite excited about that.
And so going into this, what worries did you really have about getting this established? This is your first year really trying this out.
Alfalfa seed is very expensive and Mother Nature has been really good to us this year, so that would be the biggest worry is harvesting, rutting up the alfalfa. And we're still not out of the woods yet on that. We've got, we're going to combine this, so we're a little bit at the mercy of how the fall is and with that alfalfa stand. But the alfalfa stand looks good. Which that's the biggest hurdle is, will the alfalfa grow within corn? And if you can look, it's growing in corn.
Let's
So
get some shots of that.
that's exciting.
I've got a question for one of you guys can answer, maybe, and I don't know how much you've thought about it. I'm sure you have a little, but so one thing we don't. So this looks really good right now. It's pretty impressive. We have no idea what it'll look like in the spring. Kind of depends on how harvest goes and how the winter goes. So if you come out here in the spring, you anticipate, if it's still looking really nice and thick, then I guess all is good. But what if it looks like it's not a dense enough stand? What do you?
Well, if it's nice and thick and makes a stand, we want to keep it seeded and keep it established for a hayfield. If it doesn't, we'll carry it. We would just leave it as a cover crop, no-till into it, and
Interseed grass.
well, we could interseed grass, depending on what the conditions of the field are.
So that's.
So there's just 2 options.
We started out this virtual field tour talking about interseeding Italian rye into older alfalfa stands. So I guess that could be one option that will get you by for a year, but maybe not ideal in a new seeding. You'd maybe be looking at something like a perennial grass, like meadow fescue or something like that, something with good quality.
We do a fair amount of that.
Yeah.
In the weaker alfalfa stands, we interseed in.
And in some of our tougher soils to keep a dense, nice, luscious stand.
Yep.
So I guess maybe the good thing is there's options.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, this is, if you actually walk down the corn row, it's pretty impressive to see how tightly spaced those plants are, and still ended up with a really good crop. They're not spindly by any means.
That's for sure. And then the one thing that is really nice to see, you know, because one of the other core concepts of 60-inch row corn is better airflow going through here. So you're going to have less disease stress. And then also the one part that everybody forgets about is when you're keeping this all covered here, you're preventing a lot of splash up. So this corn's not going to get inoculated with a lot of noxious and detrimental diseases. And then the other one is the solar corridor, as they call it too, where that plant is getting maximized sunlight in here. It's not necessarily competing. Like, it's tight this way, but it's going to be maximizing how much sunlight potential that it can actually get absorbed. But the main thing is, and this is really showcasing that, is that you're maximizing your cover crop growth, which is opening the door up to more opportunities. Especially in your case, this is opening up the door to a quick forage establishment.
And we've seen variations of this tried before in different parts of the state, successfully and unsuccessfully, especially up in our area. It hasn't worked great, but it's always been in 30-inch rows, and maybe 60-inch rows is the key to making it work here. So.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, anything else, guys?
I guess we're excited to see how the harvest goes. I've always been told that you might take a 20% hit in your yield of corn, so I guess we're excited to see what we do here.
Yep. All right, sign us off, Patrick.
All right, thanks for meeting us out here today, guys, and we'll keep you guys posted on how this all works later on in the season. Thanks.
Here's our next virtual tour, and our last stop on the virtual tour. We're over at Miltram Dairy in Athens, Wisconsin, and right beside me is the main go-to over there for field operations. His name is Colton. Say hi, Colton.
Hi, guys.
And we're out here in one of his silage fields. This is BMR out here, correct?
Yep, 379.
And, yep, Mycogen 379. And this, why don't you just describe the setup of this field?
So this field was no-tilled field this spring. What we did is we normally go in with like a pre-emerge, a verdict Roundup mix right before the corn emerges. So we plant the field, do a pre-emerge. This field we did not do any pre-emerge. We just left the corn grow, let the weeds grow, just hit it with a single pass Roundup. And then what we did is right about 2 days after we hit it with Roundup, the corn was probably VE at that point. We came on here and blew cover crop on as early as possible to try getting our stand established as best as we can early on, instead of wait until corn's almost ready to shade over and then doing it as we've done in the past. And we've seen to have more success doing it this way now, blowing it on earlier. We got better establishment, I think, but I think we can still go a little early. Still think we could go on even before the plants are emerged, and depending on weather, it's weather depending is a big one. This year, just how everything popped, it worked out great because the corn is out of ground and we got the heat units right away, so the corn just kept growing up and the cover crop started growing. If we don't get the heat units and it stays cooler, I think the cover crop might start overtaking the corn. You know, that's a little, you got balance after a little.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. That was what happened with a lot of guys that were applying at V4. The corn just sailed off way too fast because, like you said, the heat and the moisture was there, and in a 48-hour period, it almost doubled in size, and the stuff canopied really bad. So it almost feels that the earlier you put it on, the more you're just taking a safer bet at getting your cover crop not only established, but looking really thick. Because that's one thing that happens with interseedings is if it gets too strung out and it's fighting for light, you get a lot of top growth, which seems really nice, but then you don't get a whole lot of root mass. And that's the one thing that a lot of people fail to realize is having a good cover crop establishment is it's about more of the establishment of the thick root zone and not so much of your debris zone. But what you have out here, it was like a good mixture. When we were actually taking shovels full and looking at everything, you have just a mess of roots in there. We're looking at this no-till field, and you know, it's firm enough where you're walking on it and it's solid, but you could just take handfuls, and it's just such a nice structure, and there's so many aggregates in there.
Yeah, this is by far some of the best soil that we've seen today.
Yeah, it's just, and it has that nice earthy smell,
Yeah.
which I learned from the legend Brian Brisky, which is on my t-shirt.
Matt, maybe I should hand the phone off to you so you can show what the cover crop looks like behind you guys where it's undisturbed.
Yeah, come on over to me. So, Colton, can you remember the mix?
Yeah, so the mix is, we have a ½ pound of dwarf Essex rape. We have 7 pounds of annual ryegrass, 2 pounds of ladino clovers, and I think a pound of red clovers.
Okay, the red clover is to keep like a spring green kind of action going. So we have continuous living cover out here.
The main reason we went with the grasses was to destroy the compaction from, you know, a wet fall last year.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we just beat the hell out of the fields last year, so we're hoping to get a thick biomass of the ryegrass grown with thick roots to destroy all that compaction we created last year.
But just look at all that. Look at all that cake.
Lots of fine roots as well.
Yeah, that's a very impressive part of this. And what they're really enhancing on here is not only, you know, the biomass on top, the root zone beneath, but this is building great residue, especially when you come back through here and you no-till again. You have a nice layer of residue that's going to feed the biology. As you can see right there when Jason was pulling up yet another worm per scoop there.
One thing that we've said numerous times today, looking at these interseeded cover crops, is the annual ryegrass.
Yeah, go ahead.
The past few years, almost all the farmers we've worked with are using annual ryegrass as a foundation in the interseeding mix, which we've promoted. We've thought that that was the right thing to do, and I think it's because that takes off first and looks the best for a good chunk of the season. But I think what we're learning is, as we're pushing the limit on the front end and getting this stuff planted earlier and getting a longer getting cover crop more of the season now, longer into the season, we're seeing the annual ryegrass kind of peter out by the end of the season to the point where it's almost non-existent. And so we're starting, as we're getting better at interseeding, we're starting to see that maybe annual ryegrass isn't the best fit in these mixes. So
Or to have it as like your higher rate of mix.
yeah, and it's possible that it just may not be a good fit, period, and that we might need to look for some other small grain or some other grass type.
Oh, you just beat me to that. That's what I was just about to say. Because you guys did that with one of the mixes that you got.
Yeah, we did spring wheat, and I'm actually finding that peters out faster than what annual ryegrass does, or we need a heavier rate. We're not 100% sure what I'm going to do with that yet, but we did try spring wheat. It did get probably waist high in spots, and now once it headed out, it all petered out, and now it's all laying dead on the ground, and it looks like there's nothing there again now. But it was, I think we go heavier rate and get it thicker. I think then we can get it to lay on the ground and do what we want.
Yeah, and then you get like a better residue matting going on, where it's like, that's kind of a neat combination of having, you have the matting residue while there's like your clovers and your brassicas and stuff are growing on top.
Yep, which we went with 35 pounds an acre spring wheat there. We probably could up that even more for next year. We got okay catch, but nothing great. We could definitely get that a lot thicker. But the one other thing we did try, or we tried but didn't mean to try, is we didn't spray a chunk of a field, and we frost seeded oats this year, and oats caught after the corn was finally up and growing. So we missed a chunk of the field, so it's just like an acre of a field. But we have oats now that was probably knee-high, waist-high, headed out, died, laid down, and now we have our annual ryegrass, our clovers, and our rape growing through the oats now and coming up over the top of that. So that might be something we try to dab with, is mixing in oats into our interseedings for next year, and figure out how we can, you know, manage that. And maybe just it's oats, and then the oats peters out, and then you have your clovers and rape come up, and you have a nice green stand of clovers and rape after the oats is dead.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think oats is kind of the one that I was gonna recommend going to next.
Aggressive growth,
Just-
cost effective.
Yeah, and it's a crop that a lot of people in this area are familiar with already. Like you said, it's a affordable crop, and we've seen it do well in so many different scenarios, so it's already sort of proven itself.
Wow, we cover quite a bit there. Anything else anybody like to say?
Don't be afraid to try anything with cover cropping though. We learn different things every single year. Just when we think we got it figured out, the changes on us.
And then you make it better.
Yeah, and then try making it better.
Well, I think you guys are making great strides with all of your tinkering that you're doing right here, and looks awesome. Well, Colton, thank you so much for having us out here. And that's a wrap. If you would like to find out more about the Old Plain Partnership for Integrated Conservation, you can contact Patrick Bula at the Marathon Conservation Planning and Zoning Office, or find us on social media on Facebook, or find us on YouTube on the Wisconsin Conservation Channel.